Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and back in 1969, the first step on the moon has put an end to the space race. Or has it? A secret Soviet mission sent to build a new world where all people can be equal and work for the common good was destined to reach much farther than the moon. A magnificent ship crash-landed on a hospitable planet which is now yours. Your fathers have worked hard to recreate the best from the world they've left, and now it's your task to guide your comrades to happiness and prosperity. Only together can you succeed in this task. Red Outpost is a worker placement game for 2 to 4 players, plays in 30 to 60 minutes, for ages 10 and up, and published by Imperial Publishing. It's on Kickstarter right now, so I'm going to show you how the game works, and I'll see you on the other side. This is a Kickstarter preview, so all the art and components you see here are not final. You're going to want to check the Kickstarter link in the description of this video to see all the final art and components. But even with that being said, this is the main board for Red Outpost, and it is beautifully illustrated. Now, Red Outpost is a worker placement and resource management game, but the big twist being that none of the workers belong to any one player. They're all shared workers that you'll be influencing different ones on different turns, and the resources themselves are also a shared piece of the game. The game is played over 2 rounds, and each round is essentially a day. And each day is going to go through multiple phases. You'll go through a morning phase, then the first half of a day phase, lunch phase, second half of the day, and evening. One full round and one day is one round through all of these. You'll simply play 2 of those throughout the game. The object of the game is to have the most points at the end of those 2 rounds. Now, one of the main ways you'll either gain or lose points is depending on the mood of these different workers, because as you move a worker, you'll place some influence, and different actions are going to cause that worker, their mood to go up, which is positive points, or possibly down for negative points, and whoever's influenced each worker the most at the end is going to gather the positive or negative points. You'll also be gaining points by producing a certain amount of resources and also being able to export those resources to an export track, and you'll be getting points depending on when that happens. Now, the scoring we'll go over in detail because there's some other ways you can score as well, but let's go over what happens in these different phases. So you're going to start each day or round in the morning phase. Now, in the morning phase, all of the workers are going to be starting in the barracks because that's where they're sleeping and that's where they wake up. Now, starting with the first player and going clockwise, each player is going to take one of these workers from the barracks and place them in one of the other open spots on the board and take an action. Now, some of the spots are actually blocked during the morning phase, and some spots will actually be blocked during the night phase, and you get to see these at the beginning of the game. Now, this is a basic setup, but for experienced players, you can actually randomize which spots will be closed during morning and evening. So let's say the first player takes the fisherman out of the barracks and places it in the pasture. Now, when you place a worker, you're going to place them face down. This is to note that this worker cannot be moved again this phase. Also, most spots can only have 1 worker in it, so this means that nobody else is going to be able to go here this phase either, and it's going to give a resource of 1 wool. Now, resources, again, are shared in this game, so the resources go into the storehouse, and we'll show you as resources get plentiful, you'll be able to export those for points, and we'll show you that in just a little bit. Now, also, anytime you produce anything, again, even though they're shared resources, you get to move your player marker up on this track here. And if it ever passes here, you'll get 2 victory points and a crystal, which is the best resource in the game. It allows you to do different things. Everyone actually starts with a crystal as well. Now, this worker, possibly in this case, will get affected by the spot with their mood. In this case, it says you would go down on the mood by that little frowny face. And so in this case, the fisherman would have went down in mood, and the player that placed that fisherman would put their influence chip there, because at the end of the round, once you've gone through all of the phases in that day, whoever has the most chips here will get a certain amount of points depending on where this is. If it ended right now, this is the only player, they would have gotten -1 point. But let's say you didn't use the fisherman. Let's say you used the shepherd. Now, here it says you lose 1 mood unless it's the shepherd, because the shepherd, hey, they typically work in the pasture and they don't lose mood when they get there. So if you place this here like normal, you would get the, you do the wool production, and you still place your influence chip on the shepherd, but the mood wouldn't move in this case. So that'll be the next player's turn. Let's say they send a worker to the farm. They would produce 1 wheat and they would lose 1 mood for that worker unless it's the farmer. So in this case, let's say they put the farmer, they push it face down. They wouldn't lose mood, but they would gain that wheat into the storehouse and they'd place their influence chip on the farmer. That'll be the next player's turn in the morning. Let's say they send the bureaucrat to the lake. Now, if you send anybody except the fisherman here, you would place your influence marker on this worker and you would lose a mood, but if you put the fisherman there, you don't lose a mood like those other spots. But if you place the bureaucrat there, you get 1 card from the lake. And here, a lot of them sometimes say nothing. You wouldn't get anything. But some of these cards, that one's a nothing as well. I'm gonna show you all the cards here. 3 nothings. Then there's 1 that would give you a fish. There's 1 that would give you another, a fish, and there's 1 that would give you 2 fish and a mood. Now you only draw 1 card when doing this if you use anybody except for the fisherman. Now, if you did send the fisherman there, that fisherman would not lose any mood. All the other workers would. And then the fisherman can actually draw 2 cards and pick the one that they want. So he draws these 2. And he goes, oh, I'll take the 2 fish in the mood, and then discards them. Also, before or after the fisherman takes the card, they can put these cards back and reshuffle them, and that might give them, this is open information here in the discard pile. Also, if all 3 fish are ever in the discard pile, they get reshuffled into this deck for any worker. So let's say it goes to the 4th player's turn in the morning here, and they'll take one of the workers that's not been taken from the barracks and place it somewhere. Let's say they go here. If they place any of the workers that's not the miner, they lose 2 mood for that worker, but they gain a coal. But if they send the miner there, the miner will not lose mood because the miner likes to be in there, and the miner would produce 2 coal, and again, the goods always go into the storehouse. Now we're playing a 4-player game here, and all 4 players have placed a worker out in the morning. Once in the morning, all players have played just once, the morning actually ends, which means there'll always be at least 1 worker still in the barracks. So at the end of the morning, we're going to go to the half day. Now in the half day phase, all the workers will get placed regardless of the amount of players. And any workers that are still in the barracks will actually gain a mood. So both of the bureaucrat and the commissar will gain a mood there. And you then stand all the workers back up for this next phase. And I told you that most places can only have 1 worker, but the barracks has one of those exceptions where you can have more than 1. And also, since the morning's over, all of the places that were blocked in the morning get flipped over to show that they're no longer blocked. And the first player marker gets passed to the next player, that cool little ship there. And then you'll basically start another round. So let's say that first player for this round will take the miner, and let's say they go to the storehouse. Now you've actually got 3 different options here. One is you can spend any one of the resources here to put any worker up 1 mood and any worker down 1 mood. So they could, for example, let's just say spend this. Now when they spend this, it would actually go back to the general supply. Let's say it was that pink player, they would go here. Let's say they wanted to move the mood up there, and they wanted to move the mood down, let's say on the fisherman. So they can basically change what those points are gonna be worth at the end of the round. Or if they wanted to, they could discard a resource from here to the supply and gain a crystal. Now, crystals are great things because one of the options you have instead of doing that is you could actually pay a crystal. Everyone starts with 1 of these, and this is one of the ways to get it throughout the game. Everyone starts with 1. You could spend a crystal to add a resource to the storehouse. Now, this is cool because it will bring 3 coal to the storehouse. Anytime you have 3 or more resources in the storehouse, you'll place 1 of those 3 on that resource and the furthest left you can. The other 2 will get discarded back out to the supply, and this will give that player 1 point. Now, if another player later on or anybody gets another 3 coal, they'll put 1 here, they'll get 2 points, and then 3 points, and then they'll get 1 point as many times. This basically is always free. If it scores, it goes away, so you'll always be able to get 1 point if you get 3 of any resource once you've moved down this track. Now let's say the next player takes the shepherd and moves it to the beer house. Now, you'll gain 2 mood, the shepherd will, unless you're the commissar, the red worker. That red worker would lose 1 mood if they go there. Then, optionally, you may pay 1 crystal to make any 1 worker gain 1 mood and any other lose a mood. So let's say they did that, they just used the shepherd, they moved it up 1 because it wasn't the commissar, then they paid a crystal to make this one go up 1. Let's say they made this one go back down 1. Now let's say the next player brought the fisherman over here to the labor camp. This worker, the fisherman, would lose 2 mood, but they would put a fish, a wool, and a wheat into the storehouse. Now keep in mind, for each one of those resources you create, 1, 2, 3 in this case, they'd move up, and if you pass this, you get a crystal and 2 points. Now let's say the next player places the farmer here at the spaceship. Regardless of the worker, this worker is going to lose 1 mood, but then you draw a card and resolve it from here. Now this will give you a fish and a crystal, for example. Now when you take a card like this, you don't move up that production wheel I just showed you, but these cards do all sorts of different things. You're just pulling one. Sometimes you'll get a resource and a crystal like that. Sometimes you'll get any resource. Sometimes you'll get wool and a crystal. Sometimes you'll get any resource and a crystal. All sorts. Sometimes you'll get nothing. So there's all sorts of different things in here. You get 1 card, resolve it, but you don't move up that production wheel. Now, unlike the morning phase and the day phase, all the workers will get used regardless of the number of players. So let's say the next player takes this worker and places it here in the administration area. Now notice it is the bureaucrat. And if it is the bureaucrat, they just simply gain 1 crystal. However, if it's any other worker, the bureaucrat will gain a mood, and they would have been able to swap any 2 influence discs, but it can't be swapped to or from the worker that was used here. So let's say it was the blue player, and they go, oh, you know what, I'm going to swap this with this, and now they have a good majority here since this is some positive points at the end of the round. Now the last spot I'm going to show you here, this will be the last worker, is the Palace of the Soviets. Now let's say the commissar wasn't used yet. If you put the commissar here, it does not gain any mood. However, if you put anybody else here, assuming they were available this round, this worker and the commissar will also gain a mood. So the one that goes here and the commissar will get 1 mood. Then you could place a crystal on your player color. Let's say we were brown, we would place this here. At the end of the game, whoever placed the most crystals here will get 4 points, second most 2, and third most 1. Now since all of the workers have been used regardless of the amount of players in this first half of the day, you then move this to the lunch phase. Now the lunch phase is similar to morning where each player only gets to move 1 worker and then the phase ends. So all the workers won't be moved this round, but it's different in the fact that in the lunch phase, this is the only spot you can go. And when you go here, that worker will gain a mood. So players will be placing workers here, and this is the only other exception where you can have more than 1 worker at a spot. Then you would go to the second half day, which plays the same as the first half, where all workers will get used in clockwise order. Then you go to the night phase. And certain spaces will be blocked in the evening, and much like the morning and lunch, each player will only move 1 worker that phase. Now at the end of that night phase, that's the end of one of the days, which is half the game. It's the end of the round. You go to each of these workers, you'll see who has the most influence on them, and they'll gain or lose that many points. So in this case, pink would gain 2 points. Blue would gain 2 points. If it's tied, they both do it. In this case, they both gain 2. In this case, they both gain 1. The brown player would lose 1. In this case, it doesn't matter because it's 0. Then all of this would get refreshed. It all goes back to 0. And all the influence discs would be removed and you'd start a whole new day. Then you'd play 1 more full day going through all the phases that I mentioned before. Then you'd give out the majorities for here. Pink would get 4 points and orange and brown would both get 2 points. Then each player would get 1 point for every 2 crystals they have left over, and whoever has the most points is the winner. And if it's tied, the one with the most crystals would win. Now once you're familiar with the game, you can use these special cards. There's 2 types. There's workers and there's locations. You'd shuffle each of those decks separately and each player will get 1 worker card and 1 location card, but I put 3 of each out here just to kind of show you how some of these work. For example, if you have the bureaucrat card, anytime you move the bureaucrat worker, you can go to a blocked spot, either in the morning or evening. If you have this one, you can actually just put the shepherd flat down on the location they're at and use that location, meaning you don't have to move them. And if you're when you use the commissar doing anything, you can place a crystal in the Soviet palace. Now for the pasture, anytime you go there, instead of taking a normal action, you can gain 2 mood for the worker that visited there. For the farm, instead of creating a wheat, you can create 1 of any resource. And at the Palace of the Soviets, instead of placing a crystal here, you can place a crystal on any worker, and it counts as 1 of your influence discs for majorities getting those points at the end of the round. Well, there you have Red Outpost, and as I showed in the overview, it puts a twist on worker placement and resource management in that the workers and resources are shared by everyone, even though it's not a cooperative game. Now, if you'd like to see the final art, components, and all the different pledge levels available, you can click the link below me in the description of this video, and it will take you directly to the Kickstarter project page, and I'm sure the fine folks at Imperial Publishing would love your support.